Okay, so back to server-side apply. So the issue is that once you apply something with kubectl outside the Flux and Git, all the fields that are applied with kubectl are now owned by the kubectl manager. If you change those fields in Git, Flux will be can override them. But if you remove things from Git, those fields will never be removed from the cluster, because besides Flux, there is something else, kubectl, that owns those fields. And because of this behavior of server-side applied means that, for example, your deployments will fail in many ways. For example, you have init containers and you remove those init containers because, I don't know, you don't want to run some migration or something in that init container, and you remove it from Git. But if you applied it with kubectl, those things will stay in the cluster forever. And we had like tons of reports about that. There are also a bunch of issues upstream in Kubernetes where people are reporting, hey, kubectl itself conflicts with it, with self. If you do a kubectl apply, then you do a kubectl server-side apply, then you have these two parallel managers that are conflicting with each other. You can no longer remove fields and so on. So what we have done in the latest Flux release is that we are now blasting kubectl from everywhere. We take over kubectl, we detect that kubectl is there, that an object was applied with kubectl. First, we remove the kubectl annotation that basically duplicates the size of each object, makes it twice as bigger because it serializes everything in the YAML as a JSON. So we remove that. And we also remove all the kubectl's client-side apply, server-side apply, before apply. There are a bunch of things that are happening there. And we remove them all. And then basically we are undoing everything that people have done on their clusters outside of Git, which is very different from Flux One. Flux One, because it shells out to kubectl itself, things get merged inside the cluster. Now, we no longer merge stuff. So if you add an annotation with kubectl, or if you do a kubectl patch and you add some stuff, all the stuff that you are adding, if you don't put those things also in Git, we are going to remove them. So this is a major change in how Flux works and in its behavior. Some people may not like it, those that don't actually do GitOps, and there are like some things they do from Flux, some other things that do it manually from kubectl apply, maybe they run kubectl in CI and so on. From this moment on, Flux no longer tolerates kubectl at all. So it will always synchronize with what's in Git. This is very different from Flux One, very different from Argo CD, Jenkins X, and everybody else, right? We no longer tolerate shared ownership of Flux managed objects. But if there is a controller inside the cluster, let's say an horizontal pod autoscaler that touches a deployment and changes the replicas, or I don't know, some other controller like Seal Secrets, or there are so many other controllers out there that they are acting on the same object as Flux. Flux tolerates all these controllers. It only undoes kubectl changes. Now, this could completely break your workflow. Luckily, there is a way out of this. If you still want to use kubectl and Flux together, you have to do all the operations with kubectl and assign a different manager to your operations. And kubectl apply -- server side -- field manager, and in there you name your manager. no matter what name you'll give it, will not override it. That means you are aware of what you are doing and you actually want to, share the state of the cluster with manual things and with Git things. In the future, we plan to drop any kind of client-side operation so that setting a manager name will not work, but we will want to offer something like an allow list for cluster admins. So if cluster admins are okay with not going GitOps all the way and they want to do this back and forth thing, they will be able, when they bootstrap Flux, to specify, hey, I'm allowing these managers to also act on the Flux managed objects from a client side. So someone can run kubectl ---- manager name, my manager. And when you bootstrap Flux, you add the my manager name to the allow list or something like that. I'm not quite sure how all of this will look. Probably it will be a cluster-wide custom resource for configuring this behavior in Flux. But this is the direction where we are going. Right now, we are basically undoing all the kubectl apply operations. And that's it from me. Any questions around this?
Stefan, the only question I have is, do we have a clear notification to folks that this is going to be deprecated?
Deprecated what?
I'm sorry, that the client side apply will be removed, or are we just waiting in the future to decide when that's going to happen?
So the client side apply is removed as we speak. This is how Flux works still. I don't know.
As of 0.26 and on, it's already implemented.
That was actually my ignorance. I thought it was still an option somewhere in there. Okay, my bad. Thank you.
No, I mean,
yeah,
a bunch of users have reported this as a bug. Like, what's happening? I've applied it with kubectl and why it's still there? And it makes a lot of sense, right? Maybe you are doing some modifications on your cluster to test stuff with kubectl. You don't want to go it through Git. But then when you do Flux resume and you re-enable Flux to manage all your objects, you expect that all those changes, if you haven't ported them to your Git repo, are undone. But because this server-side apply mumbo jumbo, we couldn't undo them. So the only way for us to do that was, as I explained, remove the kubectl managers from the manage field and do a bunch of things with the Kubernetes API to get rid of this special case, which is kubectl. And why the Kubernetes team made this special case is because they want to allow people to migrate from client side to server side in kubectl itself. And that's why they create these two managers, and there is also a backup manager called before apply and so on. And this has a lot of issues, like there are many bug reports on Kubernetes itself about kubectl. We cannot wait months and months until this is sorted, and I'm guessing it will not be backported to 120, 121, and so on. It will be something in 124, but what about all the Flux users that are running in production on 121? Are we going to tell them, hey, now you have to patch all your objects manually to remove those managers on your own? Like, this is what we did on all those issues. We tell people, hey, go in there and do a kubectl patch to remove the kubectl manager. But if you have hundreds of clusters, thousands of objects, like it doesn't scale to tell people go and manually patch some objects. So we have to do this automatically. And this is what Flux does today.
that was a great explanation. We saw some really interesting ways that this failed too, with EKS Anywhere, for example, if you have a list of users who have access to a cluster and you remove users from the list, you really want those users to be gone. So there's a lot of really surprising and interesting ways that this can fail. And I think that 0.26 behavior is a substantial improvement.
Yes, right now is more, it's about all or nothing, right? If you enable Flux on an object, then all the manual changes are rolled back. A lot of people asked this like years ago in Flux 1, but there was no option but to use kubectl, and we couldn't make that happen. Now we can, because we no longer depend on kubectl. We have our own server-side apply logic and so on. But yeah, it's a big change in terms of behavior. I would say for the best, because if you are doing GitOps, you really want to undo manual changes, or at least if you cannot undo them, at least detect them and error out, which is what we are doing today.
Do you think that we ever specifically documented support for merging fields anywhere that we need to go back and correct now? Or was this just an undocumented feature all along?
In Flux 1 docs, we pointed to the three-way merge from the Kubernetes docs, but for version 2, I don't think we do them. I have to search in the docs. Maybe there is somewhere where we mention three-way merge, which no longer applies today. So yeah, it's a good take on this. We have to search all the docs.
I was going to ask that same thing. And hey, I don't want to stop the conversation around this because this is great, but I do need to interject for just one sec, just to let folks know I'm going to need to hop off because my my laptop battery is dying. I had a doctor's appointment this morning that went over, so apologies for that. Can I make someone else host before I do?
Yes, making them.
Sure.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. And then I just want to point, Stacy added some Flux talks at the end of the document, if someone wouldn't mind mentioning those before the meeting ends. And I added the agenda item for Ming for the OCI support for Helm, but the quick update is that's being worked on as we speak as a proposal, and so there's not a lot of update there, but if someone else has other things to say, they can. But that's it. Thank you so much.
Bye, Scott. Yeah, so around OCI support, we have two things running in parallel. One is we want to add OCI support for any kind of manifest, not only Helm charts. And we are introducing a new API type called OCI repository. And that OCI repository should work for both Helm charts or plain YAMLs or customized overlays or whatever else Flux supports. So what we are doing now is analyzing how Helm works with OCI, how they use auras and the custom types, and how we can design our API, which is not specific to Helm, but should also work with Helm charts. So we are in the design phase. We cannot say we'll get OCI support next month or next year or whatever. After the analysis will be done, we'll probably create a project and create issues and track this in the Flux projects.
Hi, my name is Simin. First time to join meeting. Yeah, thank you for the updates. I've been tracking that issue for some time, and yeah, I understand that we want to standardize the API, make it generic for all kinds of artifacts coming from OCI. So I saw the PR actually proposed before even we started looking at this generic API. Well, I think it's PR 410 or something like that. So is that, I mean, we're going to rely on that PR, merge that PR to support Helm, Helm charts from OCI first, or what is the relationship from this vision and that PR?
I can explain this a bit, I think.
Okay.
There has been a PR open. I think you're aiming at 450, with the title "Add support for using an OCI image as a source." And that PR basically enables the creation of an artifact within the source controller based on some OCI repository or registry or whatever you call it. So basically, if you have an, say, for example, just a static container image with just files in it, it could theoretically be used as an artifact to later on, I don't know, deploy some resources using the customized controller, for example. The reason the Helm chart kind of hangs on this work is that the Helm chart object is another specialized object which deals with the creation of a Helm chart based on some other source type. And because OCI is kind of a source type, and something just like a Helm repository or a Git repository, something where we need credentials for, etc., we need that object, or at least something we can attach credentials to later on build an Helm chart from it or from the data. And that's why OCI support for Helm charts is depending on the whole OCI, introducing the OCI type into the source controller.
Yeah, so the OCI repository kind holds the URL to a image repository, and how Flux should authenticate to connect to that repository and fetch, for example, the image tags. And then, like for Git repository, we have Semver filtering, as in, hey, get me the latest stable release or get me the latest release candidate, stuff like that, or just get me latest, and so on. And that some of that spec can be used for Helm charts. For example, Helm charts only support Semver, right? You cannot use the Git SHA as a version for your charts and so on, right? So once we get the OCI repository API settled, then we have to reuse the authentication to OCI from the source controller, but have a different way of bundling the artifact. What's happening with the current implementation, like Hida said, we flatten the file system that we find in a container, and we pull all the files from there, and we expect those files to be Kubernetes objects or customized overlays, right? But for Helm, those are not Kubernetes objects. In there is a template, there is a chart, right, which has a fixed structure. So after we get the OCI repository implemented and authentication working, then we have to probe that repository and determine, oh, this repository is for Helm charts because Helm adds custom types to the OCI artifacts. And then we can use that hint, okay, that's a chart, to build an artifact as a Helm chart inside Flux, or something around those lines. I'm not quite sure how we are going to deal with it, so that's why we are now looking at Helm source code to find out how can I determine if an OCI artifact is a Helm chart or not, and what I need to do with it after I'm downloading that tar. Is the tar ready as it is? Then how I can recompile it, right? Because Flux allows, for example, to swap the default values YAML. You can say, oh, I don't want to use values.yaml, which is the default. I want to use values minus production.yaml, which is also inside that OCI artifact. So we have to rebundle it and do all sorts of operations that we currently support for Helm repositories. So it's not a straightforward thing, at least not right now. So that's why we need to do this analysis first.
Okay, so that PR is kind of still far away from being mature, right? That PR need to be worked on quite significantly.
Yes, I plan to take on that pull request. That pull request was started by someone from VMware in the Tanzu team, I think, for integrating Flux with Tanzu tooling that are able to publish plain YAMLs to OCI repositories. So we want to have that feature in Flux. We want to be able to apply plain YAMLs from OCI repositories, but we also want to reuse this API type for Helm charts, because then if we don't do that, then we'll have like OCI repositories, and then we'll have something like Helm OCI.
Helm OCI, yeah. We don't want to do it differently.
Because it's an OCI repository, so the authentication is the same. The way you list the tags is the same. The way you download, it's just a tarball in the end. You download the tarball, right? So instead of adding two API kinds that are doing the same stuff, are describing the same remote artifact, we want to have a single source type, which is OCI repositories, that can serve customized controller and Helm controller consistent.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so
thank you.
There is a design document on this topic, so it would be
yes.
nice if you could have everything that we are talking about right now in the design document, so we can gather all the requirements and technical details.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Well, I think I'll then pick up from there. Oh, wait, let me see my camera. Can you guys hear me?
Have audio issue, Paulo.
Yeah, you're garbled.
Is it any better now?
No.
No, it's the classic issue.
Okay, we are back.
Sound like Darth Paulo.
Very much so.
It's a special setting his Linux installation has. So in the meantime, has anyone anything exciting to share? Other small talk, just to keep the conversation going.
Is it any better now, guys?
Yes, this is much better.
All right, sorry about that. It's my alter ego. Sometimes it takes over. So back now. So the idea is to kind of just go through quickly on the audit follow-up. So there are pretty much 4 things open. I think we could actually start from the topic that Sanskar is raising, which is around the standardized logging across the different controllers. Should I pick that up, Sanskar?
Yeah, so according to the issue opened by Daniel, I think, we got a standardized logging, and I went through the comment that Sunny posted. That was a pretty detailed comment, and I also went through the gist that Sunny has. And it seems like what we want to do essentially across all controllers is define the return type of the error, and then we want to have a function, generic function, which takes in any error and then defer that till the end of the reconciliation loop. So is that a general pattern that you want to repeat across all controllers? So I was thinking of I looked at the source controller rewrite, the rewrite dev branch, and that is significantly different from what we have right now. But essentially what I was thinking of is that at the end of all reconciliation loops, you have this deferred function, which just takes in an error and logs it and emits an event. But we might have to have different flavors of it, because right now we have a function which logs it, records the event, and also sends it across to the notification controller. So we might need to see how we want to handle those two different kind of things. There might be errors that we don't want to send to the notification controller also. So I just wanted to get everyone's opinion so that we can land on a consensus on how to standardize logging.
I pasted the link above about the Ford document, which has more details around these things. So a few days ago, we merged some more changes related to this rewrite, which has a new package called Summarize and Patching. So it does summarize and patching, and it exposes some APIs and gives you more control over how you want to log or emit events. So that Ford document has some details about that. It's called Results of Reconciliation. And the pattern you described, that's how we may be doing it, deferring everything. And at the end, you would give the result of your sub-reconcilers to a result builder, which will process your results in a consistent way. So the details are in the Ford document. You can go through it.
Right, but this document, I went through the previous.
Sonny, did you paste that document in the notes?
Oh yes, it's the second link in the way to GA.
Yeah, on that point, right?
Sorry,
So
I interrupted Sanskar.
Yeah, I was just saying that the docs seem good. The only thing is that these docs are geared towards the source controller, like the rewrite. And like we don't have, so like if you take a look at the automation controller, reflector controller, we don't have those sub reconciliation loops. It's just one big reconciliation loop, right? And there is no like summarize and patch or stuff like that. So I was just thinking that how like, is it just that defer function that we need to standardize, that write one function that accepts any generic Flux error, maybe put it inside our package, and use that across all controllers?
We will be moving all those packages into the package repository soon. But for image automation, I think you have to create that structure that you're seeing in the document to do it properly. You can have a deferred function that calls that, but you may not get all the benefits we have with the new design.
Yeah. So do we do need a custom error type then? We do need.
So that in the new way, the custom error types helps you express what you are trying to do properly. So if you don't have it, you will not be able to get the full benefits of new model.
But as far as I understand, I might be wrong. It's right now across all controllers, it's not about actually reaping the benefits of the rewrite. It's about just standardizing stuff so that I think the security audit can happen, if I'm not wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So it's just a way of standardizing things across all controllers.
It's a way of creating recommendations across controllers. If you have a controller that doesn't fit some of the weirdness that, for example, the interval creates, instead of a constant reconciliation as some of the more classic Kubernetes controllers do, then there may not be a reason to use some of the tools that we introduced there. But for the source controller and for the way the source controller works on an interval basis and in the way it can't do part of other sub-reconcile things without doing something in advance or succeeding in it in advance, it can be useful to use the tools that we created. It's a very much pick and choose based on the problem you're dealing with, and not we force you to use everything we built because we think that it's best.
Yeah, got it.
That's a classic kind of answer you don't want to have most of the time because it's easy to be hierarchy guided. But yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'll try to do is I'll try to like standardize logging across one controller and then try to get feedback on that, and then once we land on something which can be replicated, we'll try to replicate it across all controllers until, of course, the whole rewrite happens according to the new rewrite branch in source controller.
I think as long as you mimic the way when things are happening, it doesn't matter if you adhere to the standards we introduce or not. It's about the time and place they happen, and not so much about how they happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just wanted to like get this off the audit follow-up task list, like the project board, so like this is the quickest way that satisfies the audit people.
Yeah, then it's just taking the time and place into account, and basically the conditions around it is the quickest way to get it moving. And if you can fit any of the new stuff in it, then it's fine. But if you don't, then it will be picked up later on. And having the conditions or things in place then will only help us to rewrite things later on.
Yeah, Paolo, you were gonna go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I actually would just ask at the point that you mentioned about the rewriting also. We're on the same page there. Cool. Brilliant. Anyone else need more about the standardizing logging? Okay. So I will mention then the fuzzing. So where we are with fuzzing, so pretty much we only missing image automation controller to pretty much kind of to have some coverage of fuzzing. I started testing the full integration with all the projects upstream, and I started having some issues with source controller, so we'll have to kind of get back to that quickly. And on top of that, then push up the integration for all the controllers, and also to optimize the way that happens, because basically our fuzzing, our test fuzzing is based on the OSS fuzz from Google, and generally the projects only have one repository. In our case, I think we have like 7 repositories that we're fuzzing right now. So what happens is during the CI step, for us, it would download every single repo and fuzz each one of them, which actually would just take a very long time and doesn't really make sense. So we still have to make some changes to make sure that at CI it only picks up the current project, but when Google is doing the long running fuzzing, it still goes through all the different projects. But again, that is almost there now. So that's that for fuzzing. And the last item for the audit is the describe entrance. Sorry to interrupt
you. I just posted the link to the image automation controller for the fuzzing stuff. So all checks have passed. So I think all it needs for a couple of certifies to approve it and then merge it there.
Brilliant. But it's still one dependency that we have for both image controller, image update controller, and source controller is how we deal with libgit2. So I started with quite a few different approaches to it, but to actually get it to work upstream, what we have to do is similar to what we do with Darwin libs, which would be we have to expose just the libs themselves and then download and use them on demand when used from OSS fuzz. But anyway, I'll follow up with a PR on that today. Anything else on the fuzzing? Yep.
Yeah, I had a recommendation for that. So right now, the way we download the packages, like the libgit2 stuff, like Golang with libgit2, all those packages, we have like a build folder inside that we put it, but we don't really segregate via platform. So it's not like we don't have subfolders for Linux x86 or Darwin ARM64. So on, let's say if you want to run the OSS, the smoke tests on a Mac, what we could possibly do is segregate those libgit folders by their architecture, so that we can essentially use volume mapping. So it'll be twice the number of libraries. I mean, you'll have x86 just for parsing, and you'll have the rest of the libraries native to your Mac for testing and running and stuff. But that's like a quick workaround that because I think to install the libraries inside the container itself, you need Docker, because we pull the libgit image from Docker and then Docker CP. So you need to install Docker inside the image first, and then do all of that stuff, and then get rid of Docker. It's just the build times is going to be insane. So I think this is a quick way around it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, let's definitely do that. I think that's a good idea, especially on that case, like in your case, right, that you're running Linux within a VM on the same machine, but you kind of share the drive or something like that. So yeah, on that case, you definitely need that. That's fine. Feel free to just kind of propose a PR on that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Cool. So that is it for fuzzing, and the last item we have around the follow-up, audit follow-up, is a describe end-to-end processing Flux, and I think that's with Kingdom. Do you want to give us a bit of an update, Kingdom, please?
Yeah, the blog entry, well, it's not really a blog entry. The use case guide is a bit stalled. It's just slow going because kind of have to write every detail without writing every detail. So I'm doing the best I can to locate existing documentation about a thing and make the sections as thin reference as they can while still being detailed enough to count as an end-to-end guide. But we should have more progress Friday afternoon.
Brilliant. Is there anything you need from anyone that can help on that process?
There's a solid outline, and I believe it's complete. So if anyone who has a really good understanding of Flux end-to-end wants to review it and look for holes before I filled it in the gaps, the subject heading should cover everything. So if there's any part of Flux that you can think of that wouldn't be represented by complete fill out of the content under each subheading, then we need to add more subheadings. So that's the type of review that would be helpful right now.
Brilliant. Let me just share that PR link here so people have, yeah, just share that here. Brilliant. Cool. So I think from the audit follow-up, that's pretty much that. Going through the topics here, I see that there's a KubeCon EU maintenance track session. Anyone wants to talk about that?
Yeah, the deadline is next week. I plan to submit something if anyone wants to go at KubeCon in person, wants to do the talk with me. I'm super happy to do it. If not, I will apply for the maintainers track on the last day. So you have still 1 week to contact me if you want to do a joint talk, or doesn't have to be only 2 people, it can be more than 2 people, I don't know, 3 people is also okay. We can figure out the details of what exactly you want to showcase later on. Is the deadline right now is for submission to Flux deep dive, but the actual things that from all the Flux features, what the actual things we want demo is not set in stone. We'll probably get OCI support by then, so that will probably be an exciting feature to showcase at the deep dive. But besides that, probably something around multi-tenancy or something like that. So yeah, reach out to me if you want to do this.
Brilliant. Nice one. All right. Then, so you just mentioned about KubeCon, right? So the GitOps Con. Anything around there? I don't know if you're also talking about this one.
Not for me. I haven't submitted anything to the GitOps Con.
All right. So just read what is there. So it's pretty much closing on the 14th. So pretty much on Monday. Submissions. Yeah.
It's also a Flux booth. So for the projects in incubation, and we can have a Flux booth at KubeCon, and we can also do meetings there. Something like, I don't know, meet the maintainer or those types of talks. And I think we should take advantage of that and organize something. First, we need to figure out who of us will be there in person, because there are two things. So we can have a booth and do these meetings there, but we can also have this on online, right? Remote. So
that makes sense.
Both of them, I don't know, but we have to come up with something and have a plan around this.
Cool. Awesome. I think the last item then on the list, because we covered already the Helm OCI support, is the upcoming Flux talks, but we're running out of time as well. So I think it's quite timely. So on the 16th of February, so Wednesday next week, there will be GitOps with Amazon EKS Anywhere by Dan Budrys. We have another talk on the day after, so the 17th, which is Thursday next week, which is GitOps for Helm users by Scott, who just left the meeting. We have the Flux Bug Scrubs on the 17th and 23rd by Kingdom. It's quite a nice meeting. We always go through like key things on the repositories within the Flux community, so it's very nice one to join. And on 2nd of March, we have Managing Thousands of Clusters and Their Workloads with Flux by Max Jonas Werner, who is also in the meeting. Anyone else wants to talk about anything?
I think we are on time.
Brilliant. That's good timing. Awesome. Well, so you guys have a nice day and see you guys soon. Cheers.
See you. Bye-bye.
See ya. Thanks.